Good afternoon. I understand I'm up against somebody very important from Facebook, so thank you to you who've come here. Steve and the OCP Foundation asked me just to run through our experience in Africa of OCP. And it has been an experience. It's been a really positive experience and is actually shaping the future of the company and we hope shaping the future of Africa. So I'm from a company called Atlancis Technologies Limited. The two co-founders are Dan and Tony, very much technical background. They were working for Airtel in Malawi and took some Sun servers out of Airtel and managed them and gave it back to Airtel as a service. And that's where Atlancis was formed in 2011. I've joined recently to help these two very technical people develop a commercial strategy around products, sales, marketing, and customer experience. And in the few months I've been there, I discovered that they had built 3 OCP stacks, 2 by themselves via eBay and various contributors, and then thirdly, and the one that's most effective with our partners in the UK, Vespertech. So we very much believe the future for Africa is open. Africa has long been a dumping ground for excess manufacturing from the West. You'll find all sorts of things there that really don't add much value to Africa. I think the circular journey and second use equipment is the first time we're really seeing some value being put back into Africa and creates a great opportunity. And what I'll do is just run through where we've come from, why OCP, and then our experience of working with Vespertech and OCP. So this is the history. We are, for all intensive purposes, a turnkey systems integrator, working with some big name brands and some big name companies, some of them global, some of them local to Africa, some of them are very local to Kenya. But I think the most important vendor relationship or partnership that we're having now has just popped up quite subtly, being a member of the open community. So the journey, again, is Africa. We'll do a quick geography lesson. So KPLC, we implemented a DR site, Oracle, Dell EMC, etc. It's a major East African utility, Kenya Power and Lighting Company. In Malawi, we worked with Carlsberg, who most people will know is a global brewer. We basically modernized their data center. Back in Kenya again, Safaricom is one of the most successful mobile operators in the world. Certainly got the most successful mobile financial services product, M-Pesa. And there we were working on their core network with Cisco. Gulf African Bank, we were across the region, so add on Tanzania and Rwanda to the countries that I've already mentioned, and Uganda, and that was a virtualization project. And lastly, a very recent project with a company called Kentrade, which basically connects all the revenue-generating state-owned enterprises of Kenya through a single window. Again, Oracle, Dell, etc., were part of the solution. So what Atlancis has done and repeatedly has done, great project management, great implementation, great service delivery, great support. However, we're in a market where the vendor is writing the RFPs, and the customers are tied in. So as a systems integrator, our margins are being diminished on a regular basis, and the value that we add to the customers is being outstripped by major multinational organizations. So just to look at the customer, what's the customer saying? Development. So we're seeing a lot of implementations. When we get to a certain level of resource required, it's flown in from Europe, it's flown in from the US. There is an incredible amount of talent coming out of African universities, but they're just not trained in Oracle, they're just not trained in Cisco, and the local investment isn't there. That has a knock-on effect to the cost of implementing these solutions for the customer base. And in many cases, there's no way they could have a dedicated Oracle support resource sitting within them. And in all honesty, if there was a dedicated Oracle support person, they probably wouldn't work in Africa. They'd probably go overseas. So we're getting a brain drain as well. Training, again, tends to be overseas, so there's very little that's done in Africa. And again, it's done by the vendors. So it normally involves flights, hotels, et cetera, et cetera. So training staff is, again, very expensive. Total cost of ownership, well, a lot of these feed into that. But their CapEx is, there's no special discounts for Africa at all. Most of the vendors hold their margins and their prices as high as they can because they know the customer is locked in, which at the end of the day gives a lack of budgetary control. Seeing a lot of examples at the moment of the big vendors implementing punitive licensing charges on customers who have not budgeted for it. And as all of us know, if you haven't got it in your budget, it's very hard to get a hold of. So we're seeing KPLC, the utility provider, their billing system has been down for 2 months because they don't have the money to pay Oracle. For example, you get bill shock, and a lot of the licensing models are extremely difficult to understand and very much in favor of the vendor. There's a lot of legacy systems. So 10 years ago, Oracle, Sun, Microsoft, Dell came in very big to Africa and bought a lot of customers. We have multiple examples of multi-million-dollar systems that are sitting in a room, haven't even been unboxed, because the skill set, the project implementation in the customer base was not there. And ultimately that leads to a very low power of negotiation for the customer. And lastly, the lack of interoperability is crippling. I'm not an Oracle knocker at all, but we have another customer where we did provide a solution based on Oracle, and the fix has never been implemented. So it's actually made 2 investments for the customer completely redundant in that instance. So lots of challenges for the customer, lots of challenges for the systems integrator in the middle. And we probably reached a tipping point in the business 6 months ago that an old-fashioned systems integrator is not a sustainable business model where we are at the moment. Just some further background on Africa. So the columns here show each of the infrastructure areas of hardware, software, service, telecom, and the green area is the percentage of services across the world that are in Africa, which for a continent of nearly 1.4 billion people is a disproportionate representation. Strong in telco, there's some good telcos. Vodafone are across the continent, Orange are in the west, Airtel are all over, and MTN from South Africa are across most of Africa as well. So telco is quite good. So people, the individuals, are getting broadband, but largely through mobile. Fixed line penetration is very, very low. So some of the input that was coming into us and why we're taking the direction we're taking is cloud is big, and there's a number of reasons for that. There's a lack of skill set within the customer base to run complex IT systems, lack of CapEx in the market. African countries are generally quite cash poor, so they're looking for OpEx models and they're looking for service level driven solutions. Again, so some of the big markets that we will focus on, Kenya and East Africa. Nigeria is the route into the west, and with the oil price and the political stability they've now found is soon going to overtake South Africa as the largest economy in Africa. And then there's a wide acknowledgement that ICT investment has a benefit to the businesses that do it, and all of the NGOs will tell you that internet penetration also has massive public good benefits on education and healthcare. So why did we go OCP? I said we started it by buying off eBay from some of the manufacturers in OCP, but then found a much more robust solution working with Vespatec. So on hardware, we're seeing shorter lead times. Africa is very poorly served, either from the Netherlands or Dubai logistics centers, and tends to be quite low down on the list in terms of priorities. Interoperability is obviously a no-brainer. There's so many legacy systems in the customer base, and a wonderful opportunity to get all those different systems talking to each other through the introduction and implementation of OCP. We've found that a lot more can be done locally. So Atlancis has 80 staff, 42 of which are developers, and with the open source and the open software, then a lot more can be done locally, which gives us a lot more control over the customer's experience of the product and the solutions. And I think we've seen from earlier today the failure rates on some of the equipment, whether it be new or refurbished, is lower than normal. Software is a massive area of opportunity. Licensing fees are low or zero. We're obviously not locked into vendors. We have an increased negotiating power on behalf of our customers. And then again, access to a global and local development pool around a more open software system. In terms of managed systems, if you don't understand my graphics, sorry, bottom left, in terms of managed services, we have so much more control over what we design. And I'll go on to a couple of solutions that we've taken to market using Open Compute as the platform and developing a large pool of resources in terms of development and content development. TCO, I think I've been through the reasons there. We have lower CapEx, we have lower OpEx, and in the data center we have lower running costs as well. It's allowed the team to be much more innovative and to give operational stability to the solutions that we put into the customer base with more control locally and an enormous pool of developers across the world, constantly checking the software and fixing bugs, etc. And importantly, in Africa, direct and local customer support. Two things there. Sovereignty of data is very important, particularly in the African banking sector. They don't necessarily want it going into an AWS or an Azure cloud, which could mean the data ends up anywhere in the world. They want it to stay within the boundaries of Kenya, and certainly Tanzania are very strict on that. In terms of our lab, so the Atlancis laboratory is where we develop solutions, and we've developed solutions in learning management systems and education, HR solutions, and our own cloud platform. So we have been able to crowdsource that, which is really, really exciting in terms of creating job opportunities within Africa. Time to market, extremely quick. I'll go through some of the numbers, but because we're crowdsourcing, we get a lot of resources completing tasks in a quicker way. We are developing local talent, there's no doubt about that. So I think unemployment out of universities in Kenya is around 42%, shocking figures, but they are coming out with good skills, particularly around open source platforms, and we're able to use them. Not in full, but we're able to use them and keep them busy. And then we've created our own platform for ongoing solution development, which I'll run through. So we did some PR with Steve and the Vespa team around the end of August. Yeah, our MD's been on CNBC. I think we generated close to $50,000 worth of ad equivalency in media coverage. So there is interest in the continent around what this can be, and those are some of the messages and some of the magazines and media that we published it in. So I talked about the benefits largely, but if I look at what these projects delivered back to us and our customers versus previous developments on SAP or Dell or Oracle or those big brands. So our CapEx was varied between 70 to 95%, depending on whether it was new or second user hardware. We were able to put in small deployments and scale them up very, very quickly, where and when we wanted to. The EADC is the East Africa Data Center, so we halved the space there that we were using from a full rack, which there is around about $2,500 a month to half that, so we halved those costs. And our return on investment gave us a payback period of 10 months. In software, licensing fees massively reduced, and the complexity massively reduced. We created over 100 jobs, as I said, through crowdsourcing, not full-time jobs, but we got 100 people working on the project, and that allowed us to deliver our iLearn application, in 1 month rather than the 3 months that we'd have done if we had to have full-time employees on the job. Support costs, again, they're down because we can do a lot of it locally through our own team. We don't have to bring in overseas workers who are paid more and also come with fees of flights and accommodation. We saw our Net Promoter Score go up by 1 point in 6 months around these projects that we've implemented, and our OPEX reduction and our system management time for our service delivery team has gone enormously down. So these are incredible figures in any business, but it gives us a platform for the future. So what we've seen so far is that we can create African jobs, we can utilize African resources, and we can get to market around solutions at a much lower CapEx and a much lower OPEX. So that's shown us that this is potentially a market disrupting solution that we have. And you can see this slide was done by our CTO rather than our marketing people. But it's trying just to say that we're going to use OCP as our platform for our industry solutions. So I'll just run through them. EdTech, iLearn is grade 1, 2, 3, 4, approved by the Kenya International Curriculum Development Board, and we're rolling that out to 26,000 public schools and also into 8,000 private schools. That is built on, not sure how this works, OCP hardware stack. Savannah is our platform on top, and then these are the solutions that we can take to market. So iLearn, Huduma Cloud. Huduma is Swahili for service, and it's basically a network of eGov centers across the country. And they basically want all government departments to move to the cloud. So we built an OCP stack for them, which government can then download cloud services across. Savannah will be our go-to-market around cloud. So that will be mostly aimed at the SME center. SME sector, I beg your pardon. Kinetic is a human capital management system, but it's also what we use for crowdsourcing, for putting out tasks to the market and rewarding people when they're completed, as well as quality control. And then we get back to this point around, I remember being with the governor of Kisumu, which is a county in the west of Kenya, is on Lake Victoria, which touches Uganda and Tanzania. And he said to me, I want to build an ERP system for the lake, because there's lots of activities going on there that are common across Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, like fishing, like canning, like. And he went to Oracle and SAP and asked them for a solution. And whilst his concept was brilliant, there was no way that it was ever going to be implemented working with those people. So we think there is a way to do that now and deliver a solution that serves a community, a massive community of tens of millions of people, and that will meet his needs. Similarly, agriculture is a very inefficient and very wasteful sector in Africa. You have a lot of smallholders who will all go and plant tomatoes. So when it gets to market, there's an absolute plunge in the price of tomatoes. Technology can help. It's very limited at the moment. It's SMS messages saying it's going to rain in your county next week, plant now, or whatever. We know there's a lot more we can do by having a system that links up the ecosystem players, which is the government, it is the NGOs, it is the farmers, it is the aggregators, etc., etc. But now we can do it without having to go into where we were, working with these big brands that overprice and really don't get the market. Health, very similar. Lots of inefficiencies in the value chain around health in African market, full stop. So this really is the foundation of the future of Atlancis. It's getting away from the big brands. That's still part of our business. There's no way we can turn that off overnight. But more and more working with the customer, consulting with the customer to understand their operations, and as quickly as possible finding evangelists within the CTO community within Africa who will stand up and say, I'm going to do this, because people do follow, particularly in Africa, and we've identified some of those people in the likes of Safaricom, which is, as I said, the most successful mobile operator on the continent. So really exciting. It's been a journey. I've only been on the last 4 months of the ride, but it's exciting, and looking forward to a future partnership with OCP and with Vespertech. Thank you for your time.
So, is this on? Great. So thank you very much, Paul. For those of you in the room, this is a big deal. These people are thinking way ahead of most of the enterprises that are trying OCP. Most people are looking at OCP in niches, And they're building an entire platform of services across this. So I'm excited to partner with them. They're brand new community members. They're already thinking steps ahead, and a lot of that credit goes to their solution provider as well. So I have Philip K. here from VesperTech. Phil, come on up. So I wanted to have him just share a couple things. One is a little bit of background about their company, because it's interesting. They have been part of the OEM side, the white box side, and now doing OCP. So for him to give kind of a brief background about what the differences he sees, and are the buying decisions the same in other parts of Europe, and his experience in really delivering a solution in some of the good and the bad when it comes to delivering OCP cross-regional. Bill?
Thanks very much, Steve. Okay, so I'm Phil from Vesper Technologies. So just to give you a little bit of background on Vesper and who we are. We're a systems integrator based in the UK, and the company ethos really is to take a lot of the principles and the techniques that are used in hyperscale data centers, take those techniques into the next tier of data centers to give them operational and both capital efficiencies to reduce costs essentially. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about a more disaggregated software-defined approach. So that could be anything from industry standard servers that are ODM direct from some of the manufacturers like Quanta or Gigabyte, and switches from EdgeCore and the like. The software layer would be provided as a software-defined approach, using Ceph storage, for example, which is open source, or reaggregating perhaps with some of the newest software-defined storage brands that are coming out at the moment. With the networking, we're using Cumulus a lot. So one of the things we also do is we're an OCP member. We have been for a couple of years now. And a lot of the messaging which comes out of OCP trickle down into a lot of the messaging that Vesper do. So it's not always pure OCP that we're delivering, but what we try and persuade people to do is take their first steps by adopting some of the principles to move so they can ultimately adopt OCP. So we work with both new OCP, and I don't know if anybody saw the keynote this morning from Ali Fen from IT Renew. So we're working on the Sesame Circular Economy OCP. And one of the things that we wanted to do when we took on the partnership with IT Renew, we were looking for markets to take that into, and we thought it would be pretty cool if we could take it to Africa and put a stake in the ground in Africa for OCP. And so I made a little bit of a mission to go and identify a visionary company in Africa who would be receptive to the message. And I think it's fair to say I got pretty lucky when I came across Atlancis, because Dan, who I originally contacted, not only did he already know about OCP and he'd been using it himself, but he had a requirement to build out a new cloud environment. So I happened upon them at the right time. Atlancis also shared our vision about openness, and I think Paul's talked very well about some of the reasons for that. So what were we able to do to help them? So as Paul mentioned previously, Atlancis knew about some of the benefits of OCP, and they could buy recertified OCP or second user OCP from eBay, but they didn't know that there was a new channel available to be able to deliver a rack scale solution, and some of the benefits that come with that in terms of the warranty, the design, the assembly of the OCP rack that we ultimately delivered to them, which I think took away a lot of problems for them. So what did we deliver? It was a full cloud environment with top of rack switching from EdgeCore, running Cumulus, so very scalable on the network side. The Winterfell nodes for compute running KVM, and these are running 2.5 gigahertz Intel Xeon CPUs. So a lot of people probably have the perception that if they're buying recertified equipment that it's not best of breed or the latest tech, but this is a very highly performant, high spec CPU in this system. And then we the storage layer, we configured a Ceph solution, a multi-petabyte Ceph solution for them. And we were able to deliver to Atlancis a full rack solution, which comprised of network storage and compute at a very aggressive price point that has the support of the open community and IT Renew and all the expertise that goes within those organisations, and it's also very scalable. And I think that's a good summary of what we did.
Yeah. Any questions for these guys? Again, doing some really interesting things. Thank you, Paul, for making the trip.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Great. Cheers.